here's the issue with the WNBA, and I'm going to repeat a mantra. It is the most unlikable league and culture in all of sports by far. And I'm talking from the players to some of the ownership, to all the media members, to the podcasters, to those who defend it. It's the most unlikable league in the whole wide world. And this is just another piece of evidence to support that statement.
They said the WNBA had finally discovered its miracle, a rare, once-in-a-lifetime star who became a household name before ever stepping foot on a professional court. A player so electrifying that she packed arenas to the rafters and shattered TV records the second she arrived. But instead of turning her debut into a celebration, the league did something no one saw coming. They managed to transform their brightest hope into their biggest problem. The truth is darker than anyone wants to admit. Behind the polished highlights and forced smiles at press conferences lies a league fractured by politics, plagued by jealousy, and now branded by many as one of the most unlikable cultures in all of sports. And this isn't just outside criticism or media spin. The proof comes from how they treated the one person capable of carrying their future. Caitlin Clark's refusal to accept a life-changing, multi-million-dollar offer wasn't an accident. It wasn't a rookie mistake like some rush to call it. And it definitely wasn't out of loyalty to a league that pays her pennies while cashing in on her name. No, this was intentional. A masterstroke. A trap so perfectly laid that the WNBA walked into it willingly, and now finds itself unable to escape. Today, we peel back the curtain and reveal the story the league is desperately trying to keep buried, and why it could change everything. This is a story of sabotage, secret agendas, and a single superstar who just outsmarted an entire system. What Caitlin Clark pulled off isn't just a bold move. It's a direct challenge that could force the WNBA to face its corruption head-on, and maybe even bring the whole machine crashing down. But to understand the genius of Caitlin Clark's play, you first have to see the bait, and it was perfect. A brand new competitor had entered the scene, Unrivaled, a league co-founded by WNBA icons Breanna Stewart and Nafisa Collier. And when they approached Clark, they didn't just knock politely. They kicked down the door with what they proudly called a Lionel Messi-style offer. This wasn't just a contract. This was an empire. The numbers alone were jaw-dropping. Over $1 million for just 8 to 10 weeks of basketball. That's more than 13 times her official rookie salary in the WNBA. A shockingly small $76,535. Think about that. Caitlin Clark, the woman filling arenas, smashing television records, and raking in millions of sponsorship dollars for the league, is earning less than a mid-level office manager. It's not just unfair, it's downright insulting. And yet, the money wasn't even the most powerful part of the deal. Because along with that massive salary came something far more valuable: equity. A stake in the league itself. Ownership. A literal seat at the table in shaping the future of the sport. For the first time in her career, Caitlin Clark wasn't being treated like a disposable piece on the chessboard. She was being handed real power. The kind of power the WNBA has never dared to put in her hands. Even one of Unrivaled's own co-founders admitted what everyone was already whispering. Caitlin Clark was being exploited. They flat out said she should be among the highest paid athletes on the planet, purely because of the staggering numbers she brings in every single night. And that wasn't speculation. It was a confession. A public acknowledgement that the WNBA was perfectly comfortable using Clark as their marketing engine while paying her less than what she's worth. So when this deal landed in front of her, the assumption was simple. She'd take it. Why wouldn't she? More money, more respect, more control over her own career. It was the ultimate escape hatch from a league that treated her like a walking ATM while tossing her pocket change in return. And honestly, that's exactly why so many believe Caitlin Clark has to leave the WNBA. Because at its core, the league has stopped being a serious business. It's a political machine that spends more time crafting statements and slogans than building a product sports fans actually want to watch. It's become a clubhouse of activism where everyone wears vote t-shirts, but no one seems interested in growing the bottom line. The truth is, the WNBA doesn't really care about building a profitable league. They act more like a charity than a business. And that's exactly why so many believe Caitlin Clark should walk away entirely. maybe even build her own league. But what came next stunned everyone. Because instead of grabbing the bait, Clark simply walked away. When news broke that she had turned down the offer, the entire sports world stopped in its tracks. This wasn't just surprising, it was unthinkable. Who rejects $1 million salary, a stake in an entire league, and the kind of financial freedom most athletes dream about? Who willingly turns down the perfect escape from a system that clearly resents them? The media scrambled to find an explanation. Some said she wanted more rest. Others insisted she was focused on her rookie season. A few pointed to her endorsements and argued she didn't need the money. But every single one of those takes missed the bigger picture. Clark's refusal wasn't about fatigue. It wasn't about sponsorships. And it definitely wasn't about loyalty to a league that has underpaid and underappreciated her since day one. This was about sending a message. By turning down what seemed like the perfect opportunity, Caitlin Clark made it clear she wasn't chasing a paycheck. She was chasing control. This wasn't a decision made for comfort. It was a declaration of war. While the WNBA was busy playing politics, Caitlin Clark was setting the rules for an entirely different game, one she intends to win. And this was bigger than basketball. Caitlin Clark didn't just reject Unrivaled's offer. She weaponized it. She turned down millions of dollars, not out of pride or stubbornness, but to expose something far greater, the broken, hostile system she was forced to play in. Her decision hit like a flare shot into the night sky. Suddenly, her story wasn't just a sports headline anymore. It wasn't about wins and losses, points per game, or even record-breaking ticket sales. It was about something far more explosive, something that made people outside of sports sit up and pay attention. Because what Clark did didn't just shake fans, it rattled the entire system. That moment became impossible to ignore. It jumped from the back pages of sports sections to the front page of national news. Suddenly, this wasn't just a story about a superstar athlete turning down money. It became a story about a young woman being targeted, exploited, and silenced inside the very league that built its success on her name. And that's when things got serious. The federal government stepped in. A former White House staffer, Sean Mullen, went public and called for a federal investigation into the WNBA, accusing the league of creating a textbook hostile work environment for its biggest star. This isn't just tough play. This isn't rookie hazing. This is a coordinated, systemic campaign of abuse, one the league has allowed to happen, if not outright encouraged. And the evidence isn't just strong, it's damning. In her very first season, Caitlin Clark has already been hit with 6 flagrant fouls, a number some veterans don't even collect over the course of their entire careers. She's been blindsided by cheap shots, slammed with deliberate body checks, shoved to the floor by Kennedy Carter, and taken out hard by Marina Mabrey. The result? 10 games missed. 10. Lost to injuries that never should have happened if the league had taken even the most basic steps to protect its biggest star. And it's no longer just fans crying foul. Even her opponents can't ignore what's happening. Phoenix Mercury guard Sophie Cunningham said the quiet part out loud. The face of the league is not being protected. Think about that. Not a fan, not a sports analyst, but a competitor admitting, on record, that the WNBA is letting its brightest star get battered night after night. And yet, from the league office, silence. No real suspensions. No significant fines. No public defense of Caitlin Clark. Every foul, every shove, every deliberate hit has been treated as just part of the game, while the player responsible for record-breaking ratings is left to absorb the damage, literally. This is why the accusations of a hostile work environment have struck such a nerve. Because now it's not just speculation or conspiracy theories. The bruises are real. The injuries are real. And the league's refusal to act is on full display for the entire world to see. The injuries are real. And the league's refusal to step in isn't just incompetence. It feels like complicity. But as brutal as the on-court targeting has been, it was only the first clue that something much bigger was at play. Because the politics didn't end when the buzzer sounded. They followed Caitlin Clark all the way to the Olympic stage. If the hard fouls had raised suspicion, the Olympic snub erased all doubt. This wasn't about performance, it was pure politics. Leaked excerpts from veteran journalist Christine Brennan's upcoming book made that clear. Caitlin Clark was never going to make the Olympic roster. Not because she lacked talent, her numbers and impact made that impossible to argue, but because the process was rigged from the beginning. Her spot was sacrificed as a farewell gift to Diana Taurasi, a legend of the game, but a player well past her prime. This decision wasn't about putting the best team on the floor to represent Team USA. It was about preserving the old guard, rewarding loyalty, and keeping out the one player whose rising stardom threatened to outshine them all. And the reasoning behind it was somehow even worse than the result. According to reports, officials were terrified that if Clark was selected but didn't play enough minutes, the backlash would be explosive. Think about that. Rather than deal with her popularity and the attention she brings, they chose to leave her home entirely. Not because she wasn't good enough, but because she was too good to ignore. They didn't snub her because she wasn't ready. They snubbed her because she was too ready, too popular, too impossible to ignore. The message was unmistakable. This wasn't about fair competition, it was about control. And when Indiana Fever coach Christy Sides broke the news, Clark's reaction wasn't outrage, and it wasn't defeat. It was a warning. Her words were simple, almost chilling. They woke a monster. That line wasn't just defiance, it was a prophecy. Because the league's attempt to put her in her place only revealed how fragile their grip on power really was. And once that monster was awake, there was no shutting it down. What happened next made it painfully clear just how dependent the WNBA is on Caitlin Clark, and how quickly the whole system could unravel without her. For years, league officials dismissed every criticism with the same tired line, "We're growing. Be patient." But the moment Caitlin Clark stepped into the league, that excuse went up in flames. Because the numbers told a story no PR spin could erase. With Caitlin Clark on the floor, the WNBA reached heights it had never touched before. Her games averaged a staggering 1.81 million viewers. Arena after arena sold out. Teams were forced to move into bigger venues just to handle the demand. Merchandise sales didn't just grow, they skyrocketed. For the first time in decades, the WNBA wasn't tucked away on the back page of the sports section. It was front-page news, dominating national headlines. But the moment Clark was sidelined, the illusion shattered. During the 10 games she missed due to injury, ratings didn't just slip, they collapsed. Average viewership plunged by 55%, falling to just 847,000. That's not a slump. That's a free fall. The kind of drop that terrifies networks, advertisers, and sponsors. And here's the harsh reality. This league isn't thriving because of the WNBA brand. It's surviving because of Caitlin Clark. One player, single-handedly carrying an entire organization on her back. The league knows it. The networks know it. Even her rivals know it. And yet, instead of protecting her, instead of building the league's future around the one star capable of delivering it, they've treated her like a problem to be managed, a cash machine to be drained without ever giving her the respect, security, or influence she has earned. That's not just short-sighted, it's suicidal. Because the numbers don't lie. Without Caitlin Clark, the WNBA isn't just weaker. It's invisible. And that's why her decision to reject that $1 million escape wasn't foolish at all. It was her most powerful move yet. It was calculated. Because in that moment, Caitlin Clark proved her fight was never about chasing a paycheck. It was about something much bigger. She didn't walk away from power. She created it. That single rejection became the opening move in what would be her most devastating play yet. On the surface, it looked unthinkable. $1 million salary, equity in a brand new league, an escape from the WNBA's politics. And Caitlin Clark still said no. But the genius of that decision wasn't in what she lost, it was in what she gained. That rejection wasn't about money at all. It was about leverage. By turning down the Unrivaled offer, Clark flipped the entire narrative overnight. She stopped being just another superstar athlete and became the athlete willing to sacrifice millions to prove a point. And that point hit the WNBA where it hurt the most, right at the heart of its legitimacy. Her message was clear: the system is broken, and she refuses to be complicit in it. Think about how devastating that was for the league's image. For months, critics had been shouting that Clark was being exploited. For months, fans had begged the league to protect her. But it wasn't until Clark herself turned down $1 million payday that the story truly detonated. Suddenly, the mistreatment wasn't a rumor. It was undeniable. Because no athlete in her position walks away from that kind of money unless something far deeper is at stake. Her rejection turned a quiet controversy into an international firestorm. It amplified the whispers of a hostile work environment into a deafening roar the league could no longer ignore. And it gave legitimacy to every call for federal oversight. Because if Caitlin Clark, the face of the sport, was willing to burn a fortune just to make a statement, then the problem had to be real. With one move, she rewrote the entire script. She was no longer the victim. She was the executioner. Clark didn't just reject Unrivaled's bait. She turned it into a weapon. Her sacrifice became proof that this fight wasn't about her bank account. It was about burning down a corrupt system and rebuilding something better. And with that, phase 2 of her plan was set into motion. Because just as Caitlin Clark created the crisis, the WNBA Players Union saw the perfect opening, and they pounced. The shockwave from Clark's decision didn't end with the headlines. Her rejection of the Unrivaled deal set off a chain reaction, and the Players Union wasted no time turning it into a weapon. For years, players had whispered their frustrations about pay, working conditions, and basic respect. But those whispers never led to action because the league always held the power. The contracts were locked in until 2027, and management knew the players didn't have the leverage to fight back. Not until Caitlin Clark blew the entire conversation wide open. Almost immediately after her decision went national, the WNBA Players Union made a move no one saw coming. They opted out of the collective bargaining agreement early. A deal that was supposed to hold for 3 more years was ripped up with a single statement. Union President Wnba didn't hold back. She called this a defining moment and warned that players could no longer afford to wait. Translation: patience was dead. The gloves were officially off. And make no mistake, this was no coincidence. This was coordination. Clark's decision had given the union exactly what it needed. Undeniable proof that the league was exploiting its brightest star. Now they could point to her story and say, look, if the most valuable player in the game, the one carrying the entire league, is being underpaid, unprotected, and disrespected, what chance do the rest of us have? It was the perfect rallying cry. Clark's sacrifice became the union's nuclear option. And with that, they forced an existential crisis onto the WNBA. Because without a collective bargaining agreement, the league's entire financial structure is suddenly up for renegotiation. Revenue sharing, salary caps, TV deals, endorsements, all of it. The players weren't pleading anymore. They were demanding. And just like that, the WNBA found itself trapped, squeezed from both sides. Federal investigators circling from the outside, armed with accusations of a hostile work environment, civil rights violations, and evidence that Clark had been deliberately targeted. And now, a players' rebellion rising from the inside. For decades, the WNBA lived inside a protected bubble, niche, insulated, and shielded from real accountability. But Caitlin Clark shattered that illusion. And now, the league is cornered, facing a crisis of its own making with no easy way out. Subpoenas could soon drag years of internal emails, private conversations, and secret league policies into the public eye. If even half of what insiders are whispering turns out to be true, the cover-up might look far worse than the abuse itself. And while investigators tighten the net from one side, the players' union is ready to go nuclear from the other, tearing up the collective bargaining agreement and making one thing crystal clear. If the league doesn't finally give them a fair share, they'll shut the entire operation down. That's not a bluff. That's not a negotiating tactic. That's a declaration of war. And caught directly in the middle is the very player the league tried to humble, Caitlin Clark. Except now, she holds more power than anyone in WNBA history. Clark has gone from the league's golden goose to its greatest threat. The very system they designed to control her is being dismantled piece by piece by her. Inside league offices, the panic is unmistakable. Do they admit failure, finally protect their star, and beg her to stay? Or do they double down, using their media allies to paint Clark as selfish, difficult, even dangerous to the game she's saving? Every possible path forward is risky, and none of them are safe. Because the truth is already out. The numbers are out, and the entire sports world is watching. The league wanted Caitlin Clark to be their savior. Instead, by underestimating her, they may have created their own executioner. They thought they could cash in on her popularity while forcing her to play by the same broken rules as everyone else. But in trying to break her, they woke something they were never prepared to face. Her rejection of the million-dollar Unrivaled deal wasn't a mistake. It was the masterstroke. A calculated sacrifice that turned whispers into headlines, headlines into outrage, and outrage into a full-blown player revolt. It even forced federal investigators to turn their spotlight directly on the league's ugliest secrets. Now, the WNBA stands at a crossroads. On one side, looming investigations that could expose years of corruption and abuse. On the other, a union uprising demanding a complete financial overhaul. And standing dead center, the one player they can't silence, the one they need the most, the one they tried to break, Caitlin Clark. She didn't just refuse the bait. She turned it into a weapon, and that weapon could burn the entire system to the ground. The question isn't whether the WNBA can survive this storm. The question is whether it can survive Caitlin Clark, because the monster they woke isn't going back to sleep. If you're watching this, don't just scroll, join the conversation. Do you think Caitlin Clark is saving the WNBA or destroying it? Drop your thoughts below, hit subscribe, and let's talk about it. This story isn't over, and neither is she.